All right, well, it looks like I think everybody is in with connected audio. Oh, there's a couple still waiting. Give me a second. I see a couple still connecting to audio. We'll give them a second here so that they can hear what's happening. I think we are set to go. So welcome everyone. Thanks for joining us today. I think a lot of you know me, some of you don't. I'm Dr. Peggy Kuiper. I'm an associate professor of Sport and Recreation Business, and the director of Sport and Recreation Business here in the School of Management at UAF. So thank you for joining us for the second event of the speaker series. We're super excited for you to be here today and for the discussion about sport for social change. It's a very relevant topic, and it's going to be a great discussion, so we're glad that you can make it. I do want to give a quick thank you and special thanks to Michelle and Spencer. Michelle is an absolute rock star, so wave, Michelle. For those of you who don't know her, you're going to be hearing a lot from her today. She's an adjunct faculty of ours and obviously for the Dallas Cowboys as well. Spencer, if you want to give a wave too. Spencer's our student marketing coordinator for our program and is a truly go-getter. So thank you, Spencer and Michelle, for setting up the event. It's been great having you guys do all of this. And also a special thanks to Dean, Dr. Mark Herman. If Mark, you want to give a wave or say hi. Thanks for being super supportive of this initiative and always being open to innovation and new ideas. So we really, really appreciate it. So last and definitely not least, thank you to Shaun, Mike, Lauren, and Jordan for fitting us into your schedule. We're super fortunate to have you guys here and with such an impressive background. So thanks for making time out of your schedule to be here and lead this discussion today. So without further ado, Michelle, Shaun, Jordan, Mike, and Lauren, the floor is yours.
Well, thank you so much. And again, thanks for the opportunity to allow us to facilitate conversations like this. I am very excited about this one in particular. We have a great group of panelists with Lauren, Shaun, Mike, and Jordan. But first, I just wanted to set the stage a little bit. The purpose of this conversation is to be just that, a conversation. So please utilize the chat box on your right-hand side for Zoom if you want to submit questions. Feel free to turn your cameras on if you're comfortable with it. We want to make sure that it's very interactive and beneficial for everybody, and you guys leave, taking away a couple nuggets to use for the future. If you are not speaking, which we'll leave a point at the end for a little Q&A, please mute your microphones just so we don't get any feedback. We want to be able to make sure we can hear everybody clearly. And then lastly, we'll be recording this. So if you would like it after the recording, Spencer will distribute it. And if you have friends that missed it, feel free to share it with them. It should be a fun hour that we're going to spend together. So thank you for tuning in. Again, we have a great panel. I'll introduce myself really quick and then let the talent, I guess you could call it, introduce themselves. So again, my name is Michelle. Like Peggy mentioned, I'm an adjunct professor at UAF. In my day job, I work for the Dallas Cowboys in corporate partnership marketing. And I'm going to my third season there, and I'm very excited to be chatting with you all tonight. But again, we have some great panelists, so I don't want to take too much time. I'll let them introduce themselves, and we can go ahead and start. We'll go Jordan, Lauren, Mike, then Shaun.
Awesome. Thank you so much. I am so happy to be with you all tonight and thrilled to have this great conversation. So for starters, I'm Jordan Budget. I originally Chapel Hill in 2015, and I came into the Indians rotational program, and I have been at the NBA ever since. So actually my only job, but it has been amazing in terms of being able to rotate into different groups. My current day-to-day is in media partnerships. So similar to what maybe Michelle was kind of alluding to, what she does as well. But on my side for the NBA, I deal with all of the our marketing partners and how we find and bridge the gap with their campaign messaging and our media assets. So we think broadcast, digital, and social as well. So that's my day-to-day. And in terms of how obviously this has been my day-to-day job, but one other thing that I wanted to call out is just our ERTs, which are employee resource teams, which I would say is another good portion of my job in terms of how we come together and make sure that we are spreading the message on social justice messaging as well. So that's me. And then I guess I'll kick it over to Lauren.
Awesome. Thanks, Jordan. And thanks, Michelle and everyone for having us. Excited to be here. So I work for the WNBA. So under the same umbrella as Jordan, focused on the W. I'm the basketball administration lead. So I focus on the on-the-court basketball product that we're putting out there. So any player matters, legal matters, finance, etc., that has to do with the product, and get to dig into some of the stats and analytics too, which I also really enjoy. I am also focused, so I started in February. I came to the WNBA from Sport Radar, which is a sports data company, selling our media data to US clients, which was a lot of fun. Before that, I was at Columbia University. So I played basketball at Columbia as an undergrad, and then worked there in our athletics development department, so raising money for our sports programs. And while I was there, I got my MBA as well. So that's kind of the backwards path. I guess I've been in the sports business for, I can round up to 10 years now, which feels a little strange, but it's okay. Double digits, we're doing it. So yeah, I think that's me. I'll kick it over to who was next, Michael?
Yeah, go ahead, Mike. All you. Thanks, Lauren.
Yeah, so Mike Metcalf, excited to be here like everyone else. I'm kind of representing the NASCAR group with Shaun. I'm sure you weren't expecting a Black guy and a Canadian to be representing us there, but here we are. Student athlete, played football in college, wanted to continue to play professionally. It didn't work out. You actually have to have talent. So somehow I found myself in the NASCAR industry as a pit crew guy. I was training to compete, and a door opened for me to be on a pit crew. That was about 15 years ago. The last 8, I spent the last 14 with Shaun, and then the last 8 we've worked as pit crew coaches and trainers. And so not only do we have pit crew experience, but, you know, as competitors, but coaching experience. But then we've also co-authored a book called 12-Second Culture, which is pretty much like a blueprint to turn your team into a pit crew. And our tenets are diversity, efficiency, culture, and kindness. So we believe if you can do that, you can build speed in anything, in any organization. And so we've had some good consulting gigs, working with some big companies, teams like the Cowboys. And it's been a lot of fun and a long journey along the way.
Thanks, Mike. Thanks, Michelle. My name's Shaun Peet. I work with Mike. We run the Department of Unrealistic Expectations for Chip Ganassi Racing, which is also known as the pit crew department. Mike and I's job is to change 4 tires and put 18 gallons of fuel in a race car in 12 seconds. My lifelong dream was not to be in NASCAR. I'm from the west coast of British Columbia, came to the United States on a hockey scholarship, played 4 years at Dartmouth, and then tried to make the National Hockey League. My first year pro, I had some fan ask me if I did all the stunt skating in Happy Gilmore, and right then I knew I probably didn't have a shot. So thrilled to be with you guys tonight, and thrilled to learn from everybody, and hope this is a lot of fun.
Well, thanks, guys. It's always hard to follow Mike and Shaun's storytelling with their failed attempts at becoming professional athletes in mainstream sports, but it's always fun to hear, for sure. So something that you'll notice across the board with all of our panelists is that no one's job title is Chief Diversity Officer. No one's job title is Social Change Activist. Everyone has these other titles, but they use their platform within their organizations to create change. And that's why I think this is such an exciting panel is, you know, you'll see those positions come up more and more and become more prominent within organizations. But there are plenty of people within organizations that want to be a part of movements, want to be a part of change, and you don't necessarily need a title to do that. So I'm excited for what takeaways we dive into today. So without further ado, I think there's a great way to start is chatting with you all. I would like each of you to kind of tackle this question. And I think a great starting point is know why this is important and what it really is, right? We talk about sport for social change, and it's such a big umbrella. So I would love to get everyone's perspective on what exactly it is, you know, within your construct and why it's important that we're talking about this. We can start with Lauren. Go ahead. You're first on my screen.
All right. Well, obviously it is really important, right? And I think for me, my perspective, one thing that stands out to me is how many blind spots are out there. Blind spots that you don't know about until it's pointed out to you. I think it's really important that we're talking about this to help shine a light on some of those things. One example that has stuck with me from this past summer, before the season started, I was in Iowa for a friend's very small and socially distanced wedding. But I was talking to her family about our season and that, we were dedicating the season to say her name in the African American Policy Forum, and Breonna Taylor. And they hadn't heard about Breonna Taylor. And so I had this opportunity to share the story, why it was so important, why we were dedicating our season to it. And it was something that may not have come up otherwise, right? Unless the WNBA was dedicating our season to it. Hard to say if it would have come up in casual conversation, but it did, it helped. And I think that's kind of an example where it just brings that to the forefront when sports and something that brings people together is making that a focus, it can lead into those conversations that help move things forward. So that's kind of one small example of why it's important and how we were able to start these conversations in different areas of the world.
Absolutely. I think it's a great point that it helps at least start the conversation, right? And you can hope that some of the initiatives that happen from the efforts that everyone's putting in help continue the conversations. But Shaun and Mike, from the NASCAR perspective, talk to us a little bit about why this topic is so important.
I think for us, everyone knows the stereotypes that are associated with NASCAR, right? Like as a Canadian, when I was first approached by NASCAR, it was like, oh my gosh, that's just rednecks in the South, right? So like we have some pretty heavy duty things that we've come up against. Mike and I built a pit crew. When we took over the pit crew department, we decided our number one recruiting criteria is we were going to put nothing above being a world-class human being. And in doing so, what we ended up with was the most racially diverse pit crew in the history of NASCAR. And, the unfortunate thing in a lot of times is people don't want to see diverse groups succeed in this country. So there's a lot of things that we heard early on, that were either said to Mike or said to me that I could feel Mike's pain or it caused me pain. And, it goes back to if you can, you must. And we felt that we could be the example. And it's important because not everyone has the platform to put it out there. And at any given moment in time, you can be the example. And with the way information travels now, like, do you think Darnella Frazier left her house that day and thought she would be the lightning rod for the George Floyd movement? She didn't, right? But that's at our doorsteps. Every single person on this call tonight, you could be the change. You just don't know, and you just have to be open to it and ready to be in the fight.
Yeah, and I'll just add that I was with Anthony Sherman. He's a fullback for the Kansas City Chiefs, a good friend of ours, and we were talking about how we don't have those problems in the locker room. Sports is such this unique conglomerate of people that when you come together, you're united on. I can think about the guy I played college football. The guy next to me, his name was Patch, was nicknamed Country Boy from Georgia. I didn't care who he voted for, as long as he knew which linebacker to block on the ISOs. Like, we're good, But it was this alignment, like you were focused on a cause that was important to all of you. And the outside things were conversations, but they weren't distractions. And they definitely weren't things that created differences to where you didn't want to talk to people or, oh, well, he's a Catholic or a Christian or whatever. Like, none of that mattered. And so it's hard to give directions to something somewhere that you've never been. Sports, I think that's on the inside that have experienced that locker room where we've come together. I think we actually have something to give. I think we actually have the blueprint to share with others.
I think it's a great point. Jordan, we'd love to hear from the NBA perspective as well.
Yeah, I was just sitting here thinking of all of it just kind of piggybacking it off of everything that has been said. And hi, Lauren, I know coming in from the W too. I should have worn my WNBA hoodie on the call today. Nice. I think I'm just sitting here thinking about why it's important. Well, one is like this conversation really isn't a new conversation, and we see that history is going to continue to repeat itself unless we actually address it. And our players, our athletes, we've seen it. We saw it from an NBA perspective. I'm sure you all saw it when we're calling it a work stoppage, but it essentially was the players boycotting. And not just the WNBA, but because the WNBA has, to Lauren's point, been taking a huge stance around social justice, but the NBA players, and then there is obviously there was a kind of tidal wave after that where other athletes were also taking a stance, and it's having this conversation together. Maybe to Michael's point, so it's not a taboo moment, that we're educating each other so that history doesn't repeat itself, and our athletes have that platform. And I would say it also encourages us. I'll just share that, once the NBA players, WNBA players, we call it a work stoppage, but decided to boycott internally, internally within our organization, their employees also supported the players to actually have a walkout and internally to call legislature and to educate themselves on what's happening right now for social justice. So it's the fact that our players definitely have this platform and they have the ability to help to motivate us, to educate ourselves so that history doesn't repeat itself, is why I think this moment is very important that we capitalize on, for sure.
Jordan, I think you hit the nail on the head there. And I think that's why this, for me personally, I think this conversation that's been happening feels different, is because it's so much more in the limelight for people like me who maybe not have been privy to those conversations earlier on or been involved in those conversations, and it's continuing, and it's just going to keep going and going and going. So it's encouraging to see, when the conversations continue as much as they have into this point, and hopefully will continue in the future. That's actually a great segue, because Lauren, I want to come back to you. Your job is incredibly unique and really in I don't want to say the weeds, but really in the foundation of what was happening at the Wubble over the summer. And obviously, for those that maybe weren't watching the W as much as some of the rest of us, again, they dedicated their season to Breonna Taylor. They were steamrolling through social justice platforms, and it was awesome to see, especially as a female. Very exciting. Love the WNBA. So can you give us a little peek behind the curtain about how all of that came together and how player driven it was, and what that looked like from the inside?
Yeah, so I was lucky enough to get down to the Wubble for about 7 weeks, kind of in the middle chunk of the season, which was great. And it was really, really powerful to be there, to be so close to all of it, to all the work that was being done. And it, like you said, it was really player driven. We really wanted to amplify our players' voices, because we are so fortunate to have players who do the work, who educate themselves, educate others, have these strong calls to action, and have this great platform. And that's what we wanted to bring forth, right? Is have this platform. These are the best basketball players in the world. People listen to them because of that. So let's make sure we're having a good season where we can dedicate it to social justice. Players can speak about everything. They can provide those calls to action. It was more than just putting Black Lives Matter on the court or say her name on the shirts. It was, what do you do next? What do you do to help people educate themselves, to get involved, to sign this petition, go to this website, anything else that they can do to support the cause. It was all happening. And I was there for the work stoppage, as Jordan said. And it was a lot, right? The whole season was a lot. It wore on us because it's a heavy conversation to have, and we wanted to have it every day. That was kind of like the commitment we had made. When we stopped playing, it was that reminder to rededicate ourselves, to understand what we were doing down there, and being able to come back. So we stopped playing on a Wednesday, came back on a Friday, and it was that feeling like, yes, we do have this platform. It is important to continue to play, to have that platform, to continue the work, and getting out there. So feeling like we could support our players and amplifying their voices by giving them that platform, by making it a strong one. So yeah.
Powerful is probably the best word for it. You know, I feel like there are two occasions of like the day that sports stopped, and one of them was when everyone stopped because of the virus, and the other one was over the summer when a lot of sports obviously work stoppaged for social change. I thought it was incredibly powerful. So I appreciate you giving us a little bit of a look on how that happened on the floor down in the Wubble. So we appreciate that.
Michelle, can I just jump in? If Lauren is,
Please.
The fact that she went to the Wubble and the amount of work, I'm sure we probably all on this call probably know about, that it took to make the Wubble happen. I think just to piggyback off Lauren, what Lauren was saying, what's so unique about that moment was we were almost, Michelle, like your point, we were almost going through two pandemics, right? So we had this pandemic that we had to figure out the restart of two seasons, the WNBA, NBA, and then also this pandemic of what is the NBA, and as a league, as an organization, what's our stance on civic responsibility and civic duty. And for the most part, we haven't been so pressured to actually have a stake in the ground and say exactly what our stance is. And for the first time, we had to do that and deal with a totally new formatting of a season. So I know it was crazy for Lauren on the ground, but just thinking about it and maybe giving perspective to those on the call of how quickly things were happening and decisions were having to be made. It was almost like every minute, you know, with a new killing, with a new tragedy, with more COVID cases, with trying to make sure that things were safe in the Wubble or in the bubble for the NBA. I mean, in the past few months have been really crazy, and I'm sure that's probably across the board, not just for the NBA, but just thinking about sports in general. It's like how we move forward is what it's going to be our stake in the ground, so that's something we can anchor ourselves on. And I think for the first time, we've seen that this was challenged in these past coming months, that we actually have to have a stake on the ground on what social justice really means. So I just want to give kudos to Lauren, because she went to the Wubble, and it was the craziest thing to think that you're kind of stuck in this one spot for a long time and you're working nonstop. But it definitely was crazy going through two pandemics in the past few months.
I think it's a great way to frame it. And it seems like, first of all, yes, awesome that you were in the Wubble. I think we're all a little jealous, to be perfectly honest. And secondly,
it was a privilege.
It seems like, you know, maybe a silver lining for some of these things that have happened is that it's created a really strong foundation for leagues like the WNBA, the NBA, NASCAR, the NHL. You're seeing the NFL, the It Takes All of Us campaign. And it's catching. It's like you're catching the bug. It's a really good bug this time, but luckily, you know, it's catching fire a little bit. And I don't know that would be the case without some of the athlete-driven initiatives that have gone on, and in such a concentrated environment like the Wubble and like the bubble. So I know that it was an incredibly unique atmosphere. So we really appreciate you giving us a little look behind the curtain there.
Yeah, and I can chime in with one other thing, that there's a lot, like you said, that we did, which was great. But another shout out to the Social Justice Council that we put together. That was our players, and that was really what was driving a lot of the efforts that they were making. And something that our players had as a focus was the collective effort, you know, the strength in numbers. So anything that they were doing, the entire Players Association, for lack of a better term, was behind it, was bought in. If they were wearing a shirt, they were wearing it together. If they were making a statement, it was on behalf of all the players. So I think that was especially powerful to say, you know, it's not just like one-offs here and there. We are a group who all believe this. So kind of like showing that proof of like, you should be with us because 144 of us believe this. So it really had that strength and that power.
That's a great point. And, you know, Shaun and Mike, I'd love to get your thoughts on the power of that collectedness and making this a movement, you know, and not just about one player, one organization, one league, and how that plays into using sport for social change, and ultimately how it relates back to diversity, efficiency, culture, and kindness, and using those to promote social change.
Yeah, well, I guess I'll start. I think the one thing that the NBA, WNBA did that was exceptional, along with NASCAR, is they put real dollars on the line to do this, right? Like NASCAR banned the Confederate flag. NBA and WNBA players walked off the court, right? You're putting real dollars on the line. The one problem is there's so much performative activism out there, right? We're doing this so it looks good on our Instagram page, or our company looks propped up, or we just need to weather this storm until everyone quiets down. But this is real, finally, because like I said, we've put dollars and cents on the line to do this, and the risk of alienating our fans. Like we said earlier, we go into companies and we identify diversity, efficiency, culture, and kindness as kind of the four horsemen. If they're not optimal, it's because they're missing it on one of those points. And, we could go down a long road about a lot of them, but take diversity, for instance. Like when Mike and I became NASCAR pit crew coaches, we were just NASCAR pit crew guys before that, right? And when we became coaches, we knew we didn't have all the answers. But we knew that if we could bring a diverse group of individuals to the table, we had a chance to have someone that was at the table that had the answer. And for us, diversity, we use a team acronym. It's diversity of thought, diversity of experience, diversity of age, and diversity of motor. And, because diversity isn't just optical, right? We have a good friend of ours who heads up, one of the biggest companies in Silicon Valley, and her team was the picture of diversity, right? Split male, female, LGBTQ, a couple Indian, a couple black people, a couple white people, and but 16 of them were Hillary people, and one was a Trump guy, and they ran the Trump person out of the building. And Mike and I don't believe that's diversity, right? Diversity is us being able to bring a bunch of different viewpoints to the table and trying to figure out the best way forward together. Mike, you want to add?
Yeah, I would just, add that at the end of the day, people just need to have a healthier understanding of what diversity is. I think a lot of people, honestly, in NASCAR, predominantly white male, they hear the word diversity and they're like, well, here goes the neighborhood. And it's like, no, that's not it. Like, do you have a 401k? Yeah. Or a stock portfolio? Yeah. Is it diversified? Well, yeah. Like, well, why? Well, when one part's down, the other part's up. I'm like, that's the same thing that we need as human beings, right? Like our colors, our experiences, our past, our culture is all supposed to be designed to be complementary. And when one gets ahead of the other, everyone suffers, right? And so just trying to let people know, like, your diversity is going to be your wholeness, and it's going to be a performance strategy. And people are now starting to understand that. So for our teams and for our sports and sponsors and partners, things like that, if we're not on brand with this, if we're not evolving to where our executive teams, our teams, our leaders look diverse, but not just look diverse, but are, you're going to start finding yourself, falling behind. And we're all in the sports business, and we ain't got time for that.
That is true. I couldn't agree more. And, a theme that I'm kind of pulling out from everyone's comments is just the importance of education in this space, and also being vulnerable enough to listen and hear others' points of views. And I know, like Shaun, I want to throw it back to you again, if you don't mind, really quickly, just to talk about kindness and the role that kindness plays in this movement, and how it seems like we're just lacking in empathy across the board, and how much of a difference that can make.
No, I agree. And I think the whole conversation is ignorance and empathy, right? Like if you understand everything that's on the table right now that we're fighting against, but you don't have empathy, like if it doesn't touch you, you don't get involved, right? On the other hand, if you have a ton of empathy, but you're ignorant and you think, racism is just the Ku Klux Klan, the Confederate flag, and police shootings, like you don't have a fully formed idea. Kindness is what it allows us to kind of to meet in the middle. And we start, we start our presentation off, we go talk to teams, and Mike stands in front of a screen that just says the word race on it. And at the very end, we say the solution to the whole thing is just, and all we do is show a G. If you add that G to that original slide that says race, what do you have? You have grace, right? And that's what we need for each other. Like, we need not only grace for other people, we need grace for ourselves, right? To understand, you know, I've had the good fortune of working beside Mike for 14 years, and I've been able to ask him any question I want. You know what? You know, black, white, it didn't matter. And it didn't take me very long to put myself in his shoes to know that it wasn't right. Right? What he had to deal with that I didn't wasn't right. And you know, again, if you have that grace, right? Even grace for ignorance, you know, I think you have a chance to advance the narrative, because if you have grace, you'll continue to talk to one another, and it's really tough to hate people you're talking to. It's when we stop talking to each other that we run into big problems.
Yeah, I think it's a great point. And I know that's the term grace is like a buzzword, I feel like, for 2020, but it couldn't be more true that that's something that we all need to have for each other, especially, you know, if people are willing to learn and willing to have the conversation. The fact that everyone's on this call that's around sport for social change, that means you want to have the conversation. So that's a great first step, no matter where you are in the learning process or the education process. If you're trying to educate yourself, if you're trying to arm yourself with the information to educate others, taking action like this is incredibly beneficial to the entire movement. So kudos to you all for spending an hour with us tonight to try and better ourselves and better each other. Jordan, I would love to kick it over to you. I know, again, in addition to your day job, you're very involved in the NBA's Dream in Color program, and providing NBA employees with the resources that they need through being an ERT. So I would love to just hear from your perspective of explain to the group what the Dream in Color program is, its significance, and how important that is to have that as an employee.
Yeah, absolutely. And before I start, I just want to say, Michael, I love the way you said diversify your portfolio. That was a perfect way to put it in. I was sitting here envisioning it. That was great. I might have to use that again. But yes, I have been so invested with Dream in Color. And just to give this group some background on what Dream in Color is, it's basically an employee resource team. It's the Black network at the NBA. Where I've served as a co-chair and a member for the past 3 years. So it has been probably the proudest part of my job. And I'll say why, which may be useful for this group here, that I understand may be interested in sport and what sport can do for social change. I said at the beginning of the call that I had never been anywhere else. I'd never worked anywhere else. This is my first company. But the way that I've seen that our leadership has moved around this and supporting us, and the power that sports and the voice that our athletes can have has been mind-blowing to me. I'll share that when George Floyd, when the video went viral of George Floyd and the incident with him, I remember it because I spent the entire weekend crying, and then having to go to work and feeling like I really couldn't do it. And same thing with Breonna Taylor. And what I was proud of, that as an organization, and I remember because we had, coming out of that, Adam made it a point, Adam Silver, the commissioner, made it a point to have direct conversations with Dream in Color. I just want to reiterate that Adam, the head person of the NBA, had direct conversations with me, who started 5 years ago at the company, because this mattered to him. And what he said to us, because it was a very small group of us, was that I don't know exactly what's the best thing to say, but I do know that whatever it is, it has to be a part of the fabric and the DNA of what makes the league the league. And that's probably what you all have seen externally. And I can also say that he's also been supporting Dream in Color, hearing from us, listening to us, and he admitted to us and with us as well as that, and obviously this stays within this call, but he admitted to us that he doesn't have that circle to directly speak to him. And that's where these employee resource groups are so useful. Michael, I think you were also alluding to it. It's the fact that we can sit and help to advise, and then advise what maybe the future of our company looks like. And we have leaders who support that moving forward, and also support our athletes. I think if any of you follow LeBron, LeBron is probably, like, everyone probably follows LeBron. If you don't, you can click that follow, but he has been so supportive, and just seeing the fact that he supports what his platform can do to spread that message. I remember when I came into the league, they said, this wasn't the slogan at the time, it was, "This is why we play." But before that, it was bigger than basketball. That's what drew me to the league. That's what I've seen while I've been there. And, as we continue to expand, we're going to have more of these civic responsibility questions to come up. I think you may have been following NSARS in Nigeria. What do we do about that as a league and a company going to these global markets? How do we handle and tackle that? And what really stood out to me was him saying that he wants to stay true to what the fabric of the DNA of what the NBA stands for. And I've been so proud to be a part of the league. And I think that the ERTs really help to support and guide, especially for those that have experienced it firsthand, of what some of the fight is about. So it's been, like I said, the proudest part of my job for sure.
Well, that's amazing, and kudos to you for all the work you do on that. I know it's outside of your daily responsibilities, which I'm sure take up a lot of your time. So I'm sure you keep busy, but it's evident that the importance of that program is beyond measure. So kudos to you and your teams for what you do. And I think a key takeaway for that is the very top down, the importance of that. And I know everyone on here is probably on Instagram, and it was a trend and hopefully a good-hearted trend. You post a black square on your Instagram to show your support. But what else are you doing besides that? What's the action that's coming with that? Maybe that was an awareness play about why people were posting the black square, and using certain hashtags on their social media channels, but showing action like Adam Silver did by going and having the conversation. He could have easily had somebody else do it, probably. I would imagine he's got a full calendar, and he could have had somebody else do it and appoint somebody to be the head of X, Y, and Z. But he went and had the conversations because of how important it was, and the fact that it is, very intentional for it to be a part, again, of the fabric and the DNA of the league. The top-down approach is incredibly important in that type of support. So no surprise, with the NBA, it's an amazing league, but it's a game changer when the approach is like that. So that's amazing. I'm glad you got the opportunity to have that conversation with them. I'm sure it was incredibly impactful. Mike, I would like to talk with the group about something that shook the NASCAR and the sports community not too long ago. For all on this call, at Talladega, I believe it was, one weekend in Bubba Wallace's garage. He's, I believe, the only Black NASCAR driver. There was a pulley in the garage, and it was fashioned like a noose. And Bubba's team came across it, and it was reported to the series. And Mike and the team were at the garage, and it was, of course, like a very emotional day. The garage is very tight knit. For those that don't have experience in NASCAR, everyone knows each other. At that point, nobody else was coming in. No fans were coming in. So at that point, when you saw what it was, you thought, okay, this had to be somebody within our community. So talk to us a little bit about the emotions of that weekend, and then kind of the results of what that catapulted, what kind of action that catapulted in for NASCAR.
So we have to go back a few months before that. The team that Shaun and I work with, Chip Ganassi Racing, our top driver, Kyle Larson, was fired for using the N-word on a iRacing, like a simulator. It's like a racing video game, which doesn't sound like a big deal, but because no sports were going on, millions of people were tuning in to watch professional drivers drive video games. And so he's fired immediately, and the backlash from sports world was just like, oh yeah, of course, it's NASCAR. And that really shook the corporate team. They thought that they had been doing a good job of trying to change the image. They had this Confederate flag swap program, so they would travel around in the infields, and if they saw a Confederate flag, they would give you a nice big American flag. There were just like little things that were happening, and that was a big wake-up call, like we have to do more. And so when this not opportunity, but when this unfortunate incident happened, I was there. I was right there. And when the NASCAR security, they had these big blacked out Tahoes, I saw 3 of them pull in and a bunch of people walk out and start taking pictures. So I'm like, oh, let me see what they're doing. And I'm like, please tell me this is not what I'm looking at, right? Like, this can't be a noose, because no one's in there. It's only race team. And I know there was an FBI report and saying that it was a hoax, but I know what I saw, and no one was allowed in the garage this weekend. To me, it still was an inside job, but just to see NASCAR's response, knowing that, hey, we have to do something, A, but B, Bubba Wallace is one of our guys. Like, he's one of our drivers. I mean, he's a friend of mine. I was talking to him earlier today. And that wasn't just a shot at him. That's like a shot at all of us, right? And there's so many people that are Black, that are working, women. There's like 3 female tire changers right now that are awesome. We're trying to sign one of them. That's a huge step backwards. And so that day there was all kind of phone calls going on. Brandon Thompson had just newly been appointed as the new chief diversity officer. We were talking with him. We were talking with the team owners, the drivers, like, what do we do? What do we do? What do we do? And we decided to come up with that, right? Like, just everyone push Bubba up to the front and just stand behind him. And in real time, it didn't really feel significant, because I was there. I'm in the crowd. But when I saw it online later, I was bawling. Like, this is crazy. Like, I was there. It didn't feel like it was that meaningful. It was like we just pushed him to the front. But just to see everybody standing together, that's never happened. And for some of the things that I've dealt with in racing, to have that kind of moment, it's shown that if we can do this in NASCAR, anybody can do it.
And I shared my screen really quick because I think this is such a powerful image. Just give me a thumbs up if you guys can see it. So Mike is somewhere in here, and this is, I believe, the race after they found it.
This is the next day. This is the next day at Talladega. Yep.
And all the drivers are up here walking Bubba Wallace's car to the front of pit road, just kind of saying to everybody, like, we've got your back. Like, you mess with one of us, you mess with all of us. And I wanted to be sure to share this because, you're talking about, I know I saw it live and it was emotional for me too, because I've been part of the NASCAR community for 3 years before I was with the Cowboys. And it's just, how tight-knit the garage is, and you never want to see your friends go through that. There was a point on the coverage where they had Mike on the camera, and Mike is one of my dearest friends. And, he's holding his face on the side of the wall, and I about lost it. I was like, I need to get to Talladega. Like, how can I get there ASAP? But it was such a powerful image, especially for racing, because like Shaun, you said earlier, everyone knows the stereotypes that go into NASCAR, right? I believed the stereotypes before I worked in the sport. It definitely suffers from that, but to see, every single driver escort their guy up there, every single crew member, official, person in that garage, walk behind that car, I just think it was so powerful. It was one of the most powerful things I've seen NASCAR do in the world of social change, for sure. Now, Mike and Shaun, talk to us a little bit, like, if that has encouraged, even more conversations happening within the sport, and what the future looks like for a series that hasn't necessarily been known for its stance on social change in the past, and how that's changing and evolving.
No, I think, like they're dug in, like they want real change, and they don't want the illusion of inclusion. They want inclusion, right? So,
Mm-hmm.
so not long after that, Mike and I were invited to lead a diversity and inclusion call to, a bunch of NASCAR's top people, because some of them just don't know. And again, it's through our experience and what we've done. Last week, they held another call that was about LGBTQ, right? And again, not just checking boxes, but actually trying to affect real change and inspiring that change so that it's long lasting, right? So we force change, again, we just create actors. And even further, going into the 2021 season, you are not allowed to participate in the sport until you undergo mandatory D&I training. So you're not allowed to be issued a hard card, a license, be in a race shop, period, until you go through diversity and inclusion training.
Yeah.
Well, I think that, that just goes to show, the theme that we keep seeing throughout this entire discussion is education, to be vulnerable, to learn, to listen, and then follow it with action, and then continue the conversation and continue the action and get better and continue to learn. I think, Shaun, you've brought up a couple different definitions of diversity throughout the night. And I think it's important to understand too, for this entire group, that this conversation we're having is such a small part of social change, right? Are we doing everything we can for climate change and the environment? Are we doing everything we can for LGBTQ communities? Are we doing everything we can for closing the gender pay gap? Are we doing everything we can for our friends in the Black community, in the Asian community, in the Middle Eastern community, all of these different communities, right? This is such a small part of it, and such a big conversation. So I would encourage you, after this conversation that ends in about 13 minutes or so, to continue having these conversations and branch out your definition of diversity, and be sure to create safe and supportive communities for your colleagues, or your friends, and for your family. So I know with 13 minutes left, I do want to get to some questions that we had submitted before the panel. And if you do have questions, again, please use the Zoom chat. We'll try and get to as many as we can. But I'd love to roll through a couple of these and just get everyone's point of view, because I think everyone has their own portfolio of best practices that they've seen. So first question is, what are some of the most effective ways you've seen sport be utilized for social change? And I know that's a kind of a general one, but would love to hear y'all's opinion. Lauren, if you want to start off.
Sure. So I have a few here. I think one that I really like and would like to see grown is our coach pipeline that we're working on with the WNBA. So one thing that we've done is created a third coaching position among our assistant coaching position in our WNBA coaching staffs. And that can be filled as long as one person on the staff is a former player. So that's important. It's really encouraging and mandating almost, if you want to have another assistant coach, that you need to provide these opportunities to former players. And when you look at who are our former players, this season we were 80% players, people of color among our players. And so that pipeline is continuing to provide opportunities to a diverse group, right? So that's something that I really am proud of that the WNBA has done. I think it can grow further, but it's showing that we're providing opportunities. We're looking beyond what coaches have looked like in the past and trying to shape it differently in the future. Another one I'll throw out there is the Vote Warnock shirts and effort that was made by the WNBA players. So this was in response to Kelly Loeffler disagreeing with what the league was doing as a co-owner of the Atlanta Dream. And she is also in the U.S. Senate and running for, she was a special appointment, running for re-election, even though she wasn't elected the first time. So I don't know if you can really say re-elected. Anyway, Warnock is running against her. And what the players had done is they took the time to understand what was going on, understand why she was saying what she was saying, understand the race, the campaign that was going on, and understand what alternatives were, understand like what was the strategy here, and do a little bit more. And then classic for WNBA players, work collectively and have that strong effort behind it to say vote Warnock and support someone who did stand for the same beliefs and values that our players have. So that's something that, we'll see what happens next week. But it's something that shows that collective effort, shows the platform that our players had to really try to create change in a way and something that they believed in as a whole.
Hey, can I, and not to piggyback off of Lauren just because she's at the WNBA and I'm at the NBA and we do everything together, but I also
please
wanted
jump
to address Stephanie's question in the chat. Stephanie, just because this is so relevant about what we're talking about, I don't see you, but let me know if I understand the question correctly. Is Stephanie still on?
Yeah.
Okay. It seems, okay, it's fine. That's fine, Stephanie. But it sounds like that you're asking, how do you address the question which comes up a lot of this responsibility that our athletes have and that they should just, shut up and dribble. And quite frankly, I think this goes back to possibly what Shaun was saying earlier, that the issue, and this is probably why it's the best opportunity that sports has to educate, and this is how I've seen sport center around civic change, is that this is not about, black and white. This is not about, it's about kindness, back to Shaun's point. It's about being a human, and it's simply that. It's about standing for us as humans to have equality, and it's about accepting the fact that some were born into the way the systems are structured currently at a disadvantage than others. And it's about fairness and having kindness for all. So I think, Stephanie, I don't know if that answered your question, but that has come up to me before too, where folks will come to me and say, well, that's, the players should just be focusing on playing. It's a job. They should be focusing on your job. Well, this is our job, and we don't just show up to work. I show up as a Black Chinese woman to work. And so that's how I show up. And that's how the athletes show up, and them having the platform can encourage us to show up this way. And I've seen that happen in sports in the past few months, not just at the NBA, across all sports leagues. And it quite frankly makes me proud to see that hopefully that means that we're encouraging society to change. So I don't know if that helps you, Stephanie, in answering that, but that's kind of how my response has been to those types of questions. You're welcome.
I think that was a great question, Stephanie, and Jordan, I'm glad you called it out, because I was about to hop to the same thing. So I think it's important. I think, Stephanie, you're not probably the only one that faces that internal battle of, how do I handle these types of conversations when our beliefs seem so fundamentally different? But that's when I think it comes down to taking the approach of education and having the conversation, being vulnerable. Shaun, Mike, Lauren, I'd love to hear your thoughts on that as well.
Go ahead, Mike.
So a friend of mine is in commercial real estate, and when they were protesting Charlotte, a peer of his at another firm asked had he had any buildings damaged. And he said, yeah. And her response was, yeah, and said the N-word. And kind of in this dialogue of, is it worth saying anything? Like, what should I do? And what he leveled as James, a good friend of mine, blonde hair, blue eyed, was just like, I'm not sure if that's what you meant to say, but that word is offensive to people that mean a lot to me. Therefore, it's offensive to me. And that's not good enough. Like, that's not okay. And so he was like, Mike, how do I make a difference? Like, there's so much going on. I was like, James, like, that's how you do it. Like, when you see something that's not right, use your voice, use your abilities and your talents. A lot of people are like, well, what is my next step? What's your ability? Like, what are you good at? If you're good at creative content or painting or cooking, use that to like fuel an under-resourced area or an area that you're not usually used to, accustomed to interacting with. Like, there's so many easy ways. Like, stay in your lane, do what you're good at, and then use that to change. And also just be mindful that, oftentimes these conversations are going to happen with people that look like you. She felt comfortable saying that word to James because they're both white, they're both in commercial real estate, they're both young, you know what I mean? So it's up to me as a Black male who has been pulled over at gunpoint by cops, who's been accused of all kind of stuff. When I hear other black guys saying, yeah, man, we gotta do away with the police. We're like, no. We need to do away with those police who cause problems. Like, we don't need to do away with all of them. You know what I mean? Like, that was that white guy that did that. You know what I mean? So I think we all have a responsibility in our own circles, in our own families, at our own dinner tables to make the change. You know, with people that feel comfortable talking about this, those are our greatest opportunities to interact.
And I'll just add to Mike's, and again, the interaction part, we can't just listen, right? We can't just be willing to listen anymore. We have got to invite listening with people that don't look like us, with people that we don't understand, whether it be religion, color, sexual orientation, it doesn't matter. But inviting listening and trying to find common ground, that's how you solve this thing. You know, there's some on the news right before I jumped on this call. It's Pete Buttigieg speaking, and a Trump guy comes up the front of his rally and just starts screaming at him. And Pete's like, hey, can I just get my point across? The guy keeps screaming. Pete's like, can I just get my point across? The Trump guy keeps screaming. Pete goes, can I get my point across? And then goes, will you disavow white supremacy right now? And the guy's like, hell yeah, I will. And he's like, well, okay, well, we agree on something. Let's go from there. And I think one of the things that we do is we look at the things that divide us before we look at the things that could possibly unite us. And if we all have something in common, right? I guarantee you, everybody on this call right now, raise your hand. Raise your hand if you just want to be happy in your life, right? We all have that in common, all right? And that goes back to something in our tribal biology called the predetermination theory. To be truly happy in your life, you need to be connected to others, you need to be competent at what you do, and you need to be authentic in your life. And if we have people amongst us that aren't allowed to be authentic because they're trying to be shoehorned into the white version of them or the this version of them or the this version of them, then they don't get to be happy. And everyone deserves to be happy in this thing. So again, look for the things that we have in common and go from there.
That's some great feedback. And, you know, I think it's important to note too, you know, as the more you have these conversations, probably the easier they're going to get. You know, it takes courage to have these conversations and be an ally for people. And I've loved it. You know, it makes me feel like I'm making a difference and making a change. And I will tell you, like, if you don't feel empowered to have those conversations, I hope you leave this conversation feeling empowered to do it, because you have myself, Lauren, Shaun, Mike, Jordan, Peggy, everyone behind you saying you should have these conversations and you can. And we're going to equip you with the tools to do so, even if it's with our short hour together. And I know we only have 2 minutes left, so I want to do a really quick round robin with the panelists. What's one piece of advice that you can give everyone tuning in to use their platform and their abilities to make a difference?
I can start.
Yeah, go ahead.
I would say it's so Mike kind of alluded to what you can do. You all have your own skill sets. But one thing I do definitely want to warn, I think just a reminder that most of the change happened for young folks. And one thing I want to warn is fatigue in this social justice space. You can feel like nothing is happening. I felt that so many times. I've wanted to stop, but then I think about my grandmother who went to high school at a segregated school where it's all Black, and the all white school was up the street. We have made progress over years, and that's because the conversations have continued and that people were persistent and young folks did not stop. So I don't know if that is the advice, but I do want to warn for fatigue, because that's going to happen. But just keep going, because there will be change. We will see it if we do this together. And so sports is a great platform to do that.
It's a great point, Jordan. Yep, very real. Lauren, all right, 15 seconds.
I mean, similar. I would say having the conversations, asking the questions, and making sure people are feeling included. I know we talked a lot about diversity, but, you know, not forgetting the inclusion part, where it's, you know, not just getting invited to the dance, but being asked to dance. So making sure that's an effort. You can't do that passively. You have to do that actively. You have to reach out and make sure people are feeling like they are a part of a group and they are welcome there and they bring value to whatever group that is. So that would be my, I don't know if it's really sport specific, but in general.
I think it's great. It was perfect. Shaun.
I'll end by saying that hate cannot drive out hate. Only love can do that, and that your heart is the same size as your fist. So you young people, stay in the fight. And to Heidi Quinn, Malachi Martin, and Chris Kirsch, if I was a GM, you'd be the first three I'd interview because you showed your face the whole time tonight. So thank you for that.
Mike, 10 seconds.
Listen, learn, take time, be patient in how you respond to people, but just find your voice. I love that people comment on posts. I love people share posts, but create your own content. You know, speaking from the heart and your personal experience, how you feel is going to draw more people in far more than, you know, reverberating what someone else is doing.
Awesome. Amazing advice from all of you guys. I will round it out with one piece of advice that I think is so important. Use your purchasing power to support brands that are active in this space. You have more power than you think. They want your money, so you use it wisely. So thank you to everyone who joined. I know we went a minute over, so I'm sorry. Thank you to Lauren, Shaun, Mike, Jordan. Amazing conversation. We probably could have talked for hours about this. To everybody on this, connect with us on LinkedIn. We want to hear from you. We want to continue the conversation, and keep an eye out for the last two of our panels. In November, it will be data and analytics, storytelling with data and analytics, there's sport, and then December will be esports. So it should be fun. Thank you guys again, and enjoy your evening. See ya.
Thank you. Thanks, everyone.